Ever wonder how some things like, a song or a product just explode and become super popular,
Yeah,
but other things kind of just fade away,
right,
and you wonder what makes the difference?
right.
Well, that's what we're looking at today.
Okay,
The world of social networks.
okay.
We're going to be diving into some
For
excerpts
okay.
from a college lecture called A Power of Social Networks, How Ideas Circulate and Reach,
Interesting.
taught by Professor J. Christopher Westland.
Sounds fascinating.
I think we're going to learn a lot about how trends catch on and why,
Yeah, me too.
and even how those trends can lead to like big cultural shifts or even revolutions.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
that's a big claim.
it is.
But Professor Westland's work really gets to the heart of how connected we all are.
Right.
Like even beyond just what we see on Facebook or Instagram.
Totally.
It's way bigger than that.
Yeah, it's like there's this invisible web of relationships that connects us all.
Right.
But before we get too deep into it,
Mm.
let's start with the basics. Okay?
What exactly are social networks
Yeah, that's a good question.
in this context? I mean,
Right.
not just like our Facebook friends.
So it really is all about those webs of relationships, but think beyond just like your immediate circle.
Okay.
It's family, friends, colleagues,
Hmm.
even those people you only vaguely recognize from like the gym or something.
Right.
They're all part of your network.
And they all can affect us.
Exactly. They're the pathways for information and influence.
Oh, that's
They
interesting.
shape our decisions, our behaviors, even how culture itself evolves.
So it's not just about who we know, but it's how we're all connected.
Exactly. That's really fascinating.
Professor Westland talks about different types of networks
Okay.
and how that how of connection really matters.
That makes sense.
Like you can think of it like a city's infrastructure,
Okay.
like a well-planned city
Mhm.
with efficient highways, clear signage.
Right.
It makes it easy to get around. Information
Swag.
flows smoothly, just like in certain networks.
Okay, so like, what are some different city layouts, we could say,
Oh, that's good.
when it comes to networks?
Okay, so you have your random networks
Okay,
where connections are pretty evenly distributed.
so that's more like quiet suburban streets?
Yeah, like a grid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then there are small world networks
Okay.
where people cluster in neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
but are still linked through a few main roads.
Okay.
You might bump into someone from another part of town at the grocery store, for example.
Right.
They're not in your immediate circle, but you're still connected through that network.
Okay.
And then there are scale-free networks.
Okay.
And those are where things get really interesting.
What makes those so different?
Think about those massive highway interchanges
Okay.
where tons of traffic conversions.
Okay.
In a scale-free network, a few powerful hubs dominate the connections.
So like Google, for example,
Exactly.
or a celebrity with millions of followers.
Yeah, those are great examples.
Okay.
The internet itself is a perfect illustration of a scale-free network.
Right.
Some websites like Google or major news outlets
Yeah,
have millions of links pointing to them.
it's true.
That's not by accident.
Right.
It's the scale-free model at work.
So that affects how we find information,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
how ideas spread,
Mm-hmm.
even how businesses market themselves.
It's all connected.
Wow.
These hubs are really powerful.
They are, but Professor Westland mentions removing them
Yes.
could cause some major disruptions.
Right.
That sounds kind of scary.
It can be.
Yeah.
Think about it. If Google vanished overnight,
Oh,
the internet wouldn't just be a little slower.
Right.
It would be utter chaos.
yeah, that's true.
Those hubs, while powerful,
Huh.
create vulnerabilities within the network.
I see. So if someone was trying
Yeah.
to do something bad, they could manipulate those hubs.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, understanding those dynamics is crucial for good.
Okay.
For example, it's how marketing campaigns go viral,
Mhm.
how social movements gain traction,
Right.
and unfortunately, it's also how misinformation and propaganda can rapidly spread.
So it's really important to understand how these networks work.
It is.
Okay, well, we've talked about hubs,
Right.
but what about that idea of 6 degrees of separation?
Oh, yeah, everyone's heard that one.
Yeah, is it true?
That we're only a handful of connections away from anyone on the planet.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty far-fetched.
It does.
But back in the 1960s, Stanley Milgram ran an experiment
Okay.
that gave us some solid evidence.
Interesting.
He asked people in Nebraska
Okay.
to send letters to a stockbroker in Boston,
All right.
but with the twist, they could only send it to someone they knew on a first-name basis,
Okay.
who they thought might be closer to the target.
So it's like a chain letter, but with a very specific goal.
Yeah, exactly.
But how did that prove anything about networks?
Well, what's fascinating is that most letters reached the stockbroker in just a few steps,
Oh, wow.
often 2 or 3.
That's amazing.
And when researchers scaled this concept globally,
Mm-hmm.
the 6 degrees of separation idea held up.
Really?
It turns out those hubs we talked about play a crucial role.
So it's like,
In Milbram's study, a small number of highly connected people were responsible for a huge chunk of the letters reaching their destination.
I see. So it's not just about random connections. It's about those strategic links
You got it.
to people who bridge different worlds.
That's a great way to put it. Think of it historically.
Okay.
Paul Revere's famous Midnight Ride,
Yeah.
it wasn't just about shouting, "The British are coming."
Yeah.
He was successful because he was a hub,
Oh, interesting.
connected to all sorts of different social groups and communities.
So his message spread further and faster because of who he knew.
Exactly. He had those high-traffic routes built into his network.
I see.
Now, in contrast, William Dawes set out with a similar message that same night,
Oh, really?
but his network wasn't as strategically structured.
Mm.
His ride had much less impact.
That's wild.
It's a really powerful example.
It is. It makes you think about how, even back then, the way people were connected really mattered.
It's a timeless principle, and it's even more critical in today's world where information travels at lightning speed,
Right.
and those hubs can amplify both the good and the bad.
Yeah, it seems like it's even more important now
It is.
to understand all this.
Yeah, we need to be more aware of how these network dynamics shape our lives and the world around us.
This is already blowing my mind.
Oh, good.
I'm starting to see those aha moments you promise.
I told you.
But I'm also wondering about something.
Hmm.
Are those strong connections to hubs always the most important?
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, sometimes it feels like the most surprising information comes from unexpected places.
You're touching on something really important.
Oh, okay.
And it's something Professor Westland explores in detail.
Okay.
It's the idea of weak ties.
Weak ties.
Sometimes those loose connections, the people you wouldn't necessarily consider close friends, are the ones who bring you the most novel information.
Really, that seems counterintuitive. You'd think your close friends would be your best source for new ideas.
Think about it this way. Your close friends often run in the same circles,
Mm-hmm.
share similar interests, consume similar media,
Right.
seeing and hearing a lot of the same things you are.
Okay.
But those weak ties, they're like bridges to entirely different worlds. They can
Uh-huh.
introduce you to fresh perspectives, unexpected opportunities, even challenge your assumptions.
So those acquaintances from a work conference
Exactly.
or that friend of a friend you occasionally chat with online,
Yeah.
they could actually be really valuable connections.
Absolutely. They can open doors to new jobs, hobbies,
Oh, wow.
even romantic relationships.
Really?
Never underestimate the power of those seemingly insignificant connections. They can be game changers.
So maintaining those weak ties, even if they seem casual,
Yeah,
can be really beneficial.
precisely cultivating a diverse network with both strong and weak ties can give you a real advantage, both personally and professionally.
Hmm.
It expands your horizons and helps you tap into a wider range of information and opportunities.
This is all making a lot more sense now.
Good.
Okay, so we've covered these different types of networks
Yeah,
and how connections can impact the flow of information.
right.
But what about those trends that seem to explode out of nowhere?
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, the things that everyone is talking about or buying or doing.
Right.
How does that happen?
Good question.
Yeah, it's like some things have this hidden momentum and then boom, they hit a tipping point and take off like a rocket.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
So what's the secret sauce there?
Well, Professor Westland dives into those tipping points,
Okay.
and it's not just about something being good or even popular.
Mhm.
It's about the perfect storm of network dynamics, social context, and what he calls stickiness.
Stickiness.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So think about a catchy song
Okay.
that gets stuck in your head.
Yeah.
Or a news headline.
Okay.
So shocking you can't forget it.
Right.
Stickiness is that quality that makes an idea memorable and compelling.
Okay.
It's about sparking emotion,
Mm-hmm.
triggering curiosity,
Okay.
or simply being incredibly easy to repeat and share.
So it's not enough to have a great idea.
No,
It has to be designed to spread,
exactly.
almost like a virus.
Like a virus.
Okay.
And, those hubs we talked about,
Yeah.
they play a crucial role in reaching that tipping point.
Okay.
Professor Westland talks about the law of the few,
Law of the few.
where a small percentage of highly connected individuals
Right.
often drive massive change.
Okay.
Think about those early adopters,
Yeah.
who are always the first to try new things,
Right.
or those influencers who can make or break a product with a single post.
So it's not just about the message itself. It's
Yeah.
about the messengers, too.
Exactly.
Right.
And those messengers need to be strategically positioned within the network
Right.
to have the biggest impact.
That makes sense.
A great historical example is Paul Revere,
Oh, yeah.
who we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
He wasn't just a writer, he was a master networker.
Interesting.
He knew exactly which people to connect with
Right.
to spread the alarm as quickly and effectively as possible.
So if we compare Paul Revere to a modern-day influencer, I mean, are their roles really that different?
It's an interesting parallel.
Yeah.
Both are hubs in their respective networks,
Right.
and both have the power to amplify messages and influence behavior.
Okay.
But today's digital landscape
I
adds layers of complexity.
I bet.
Algorithms curate what we see,
Right.
creating filter bubbles that can reinforce existing beliefs
Right.
and make it harder to reach people outside those echo chambers.
So even if you have the most sticky message in the world,
Yeah,
if it's only reaching people who already agree with you,
right.
it won't necessarily create a tipping point.
That's a crucial point.
Okay.
Breaking out of those filter bubbles is one of the biggest challenges.
I see.
Facing anyone who wants to create widespread change today,
Wow.
it's not enough to just be persuasive. You need to be strategic about how you navigate the network
Okay.
and reach those who might be outside your usual sphere of influence.
So we've got stickiness,
Mm-hmm.
the law of the few,
Yep.
and these filter bubbles
Right.
to contend with.
It's a lot to think about.
It feels like a high-stakes game.
It can be.
Are there any real-world examples where we can see all this in action?
Absolutely. Professor Westland uses the example of teen smoking
Oh, okay.
to illustrate how these factors can collide.
So like how, even though everyone knows smoking is bad,
Right.
teenagers still do it.
Yeah, for years, anti-smoking campaigns struggled to make a dent in teen smoking rates.
Why was that?
Well, it was more complicated than that.
A bit.
The image of smoking had become sticky in a negative way.
Okay.
It was associated with rebellion, coolness,
Right.
and a sense of adulthood,
Yeah, you see that in movies and stuff.
and peer pressure within those tightly knit teen networks.
Right.
Amplified those associations.
So even though public health officials were trying to spread a positive message,
Yeah.
the negative associations were more powerful.
Exactly. They were fighting against decades of social conditioning and deeply ingrained network dynamics.
I see.
It was only when they started targeting those networks directly,
Okay.
changing social norms and making not smoking the cool thing to do,
Interesting.
that they began to see real progress.
So they had to create a new tipping point
Precisely.
to overcome the old one.
They needed to disrupt the existing network dynamics.
Okay.
Make the message of a smoke-free lifestyle stickier
Right.
and enlist new influencers within those teen communities.
That's fascinating.
It's a great example of how these concepts can be applied to real-world problems.
It is, but it also makes me wonder, can tipping points be engineered?
Oh, that's a great question.
I mean, can companies or organizations intentionally make their products or ideas go viral?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's something marketers and social scientists are constantly trying to crack.
Right.
There are definitely techniques that can increase the chances of something catching on.
Okay.
Viral marketing campaigns aim to create content that's inherently shareable
Mhm.
and designed to spread organically through social networks.
So like those catchy videos that everyone is forwarding to their friends?
Exactly. Those are designed to go viral.
Okay.
And then there's influencer marketing,
Right.
where brands partner with those highly connected individuals
Okay.
to leverage their existing audiences and build credibility.
So it's like tapping into those ready-made high-traffic routes within the network.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And don't forget the power of social proof.
Oh, yeah.
When people see others embracing an idea or product,
Right.
they're more likely to jump on board as well.
Yeah, fear of missing out.
Exactly. It's that fear of missing out that drives a lot of trends.
So it's a combination of factors
It is.
that have to align just right
Yeah.
to create that tipping point.
Precisely. And while we can try to analyze those factors
Right.
and engineer the right conditions,
Okay.
there's always an element of unpredictability.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes the most unexpected things catch fire,
Right.
while others that seem destined for success fizzle out.
So there's still some mystery to it all.
Absolutely, and that's what makes studying social networks so fascinating. It's a
Yeah.
blend of science and art,
Okay.
of data analysis and human psychology.
So we've talked about how tipping points work in general.
Yeah.
Are there any other specific examples
Oh, yeah.
Professor Westland uses to illustrate these concepts?
He does one of the most fascinating cases he highlights.
Okay.
Is the revival of Hush Puppies shoes
Hush Puppies.
in the 1990s.
I remember those.
This was a brand that was practically dead in the water.
Yeah, they were like
Considered outdated and unfashionable.
your dad's shoes.
Exactly.
So how did they suddenly become like the hot new thing?
Well, it's a classic example of the law of the few at work.
Okay.
But with a twist, it started organically.
Okay.
With a small group of trendsetters in New York City,
Okay.
embracing the shoes as part of their ironic retro style.
Oh,
There was no big marketing campaign,
interesting.
no celebrity endorsements.
Hmm.
It was just a spontaneous fashion choice
Okay.
that happened to resonate with a specific group of
So
influencers.
it's like a fashion virus spreading through those tight-knit social circles.
Well, exactly.
Interesting.
And then the fashion magazines,
Right?
those mavens always on the lookout for the next big thing,
Right.
picked up on the trend and started featuring hush parties in their spreads.
I see.
From there, it was only a matter of time before the mainstream caught on.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
How a small group of people in a specific context
Right.
can spark a nationwide trend.
Yeah, it really shows the power of those early adopters
Right.
and the way they influence those around them.
And it highlights how those weak ties we discussed earlier
Yes,
can play a crucial role in bridging different social worlds.
they're essential.
So those fashion mavens weren't necessarily part of the original hipster circles,
Right.
but they had those weak ties that allowed them to see what was happening and then
Exactly.
amplify the trend to a wider audience.
That's the power of weak ties.
So even though the fashion industry might seem like this exclusive world,
Right.
it's still subject to those same network dynamics we've been discussing.
Absolutely no social sphere is immune to the forces of influence that spread through networks.
We've been focusing on these positive tipping points,
Right.
but I imagine these same dynamics could be at play when it comes to less desirable trends,
Oh, yeah, of course.
even dangerous ones.
Unfortunately, yes. Professor Westland points to the Arab Spring as a powerful example
Okay.
of how social media, while not the sole cause,
Mm-hmm.
acted as a powerful accelerant in those uprisings.
That's a force multiplier.
Precisely. It allowed activists to coordinate protests, share information,
Right.
and bypass traditional media channels that were often controlled by oppressive regimes.
Yeah.
It helped those movements reach a tipping point much faster than they could have without those digital networks.
So social media really did change the game
It did.
when it comes to social movements and political change.
It's a double-edged sword, of course.
Right.
While social media can be a force for good, it can also be in to spread misinformation,
Right.
incite violence, and manipulate public opinion.
It's a powerful tool.
It is, and that's why understanding these network dynamics is more important than ever in this digital age.
It seems like it.
It's essential we need to be aware of how these platforms shape our perceptions,
Okay.
how algorithms filter the information we see,
Right.
and how those hidden network structures influence our thoughts, behaviors,
Yeah.
and even our understanding of the world around us.
This is heavy stuff.
It is.
It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah, we have.
Where do we even go from here? It feels like we've opened this Pandora's box.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And now I'm not sure I even know what to do with all this information.
I get it.
It's a lot.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
It's true.
From the basic science of networks to real-world examples of how they shape everything from fashion trends to revolutions.
Right. And the digital age is just like amplifying all of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Social media algorithms.
Yeah,
The speed at which information travels,
it's a lot.
it's kind of overwhelming.
It can be.
But Professor Westland seems to be saying that understanding social networks is even more crucial now.
He is.
So where do we even begin?
That's the big question.
It is.
It can't just be fascinating theories.
Right.
It has to be about empowering ourselves to actually, navigate this complex world.
Okay, so how do we do that?
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is awareness.
Awareness of what?
Well, awareness of the networks we are a part of,
Okay.
both online and offline.
Okay.
Who are those hubs in your life?
Hmm.
What information sources are shaping your worldview?
Yeah.
Are you getting caught in filter bubbles without even realizing it?
Okay, so like take a step back
Yeah,
and look at our connections and think about how they're influencing us.
exactly. It's like taking an inventory of your social capital.
I like that.
Yeah, are you investing it wisely? Are you diversifying your portfolio of connections?
Yeah, are you nurturing those weak ties
Right.
that could lead to something new?
Fresh perspectives, opportunities.
Okay, I like that it makes it feel more actionable.
Good.
So it's not just about passively scrolling through social media.
No.
It's about being more intentional about how we engage with those networks.
Exactly. Professor Westland talks about the importance of media literacy in this context.
Media literacy.
It's about questioning the information we encounter.
Okay.
Seeking out diverse viewpoints, being aware of how algorithms shape the content we see.
So it's like,
You're not just consuming information,
yeah,
but you're being more critical of it. You become an active participant in the flow of information.
not just letting it wash over you.
Exactly. And that's where those critical thinking skills come in.
Okay, so how do we get better at that?
Well, it's a challenge, but there are some practical steps we can take.
Like what?
One is to diversify our information sources.
Okay.
Don't rely on just one news outlet or one social media platform.
Right.
Expose yourself to different perspectives, even if they make you uncomfortable.
Get out of that echo chamber.
Yeah.
Right.
Another tip is to be more aware of those emotional triggers.
Okay.
Misinformation often spreads through fear, anger, and outrage.
Right.
If something makes you feel those strong emotions, pause and ask yourself,
Okay.
is this credible?
Yeah.
What's the source?
Mm-hmm.
Am I getting the full story?
So take a breath
Yes.
before hitting that share button.
Exactly.
Okay.
And finally, don't be afraid to unfollow, mute, or block those sources that consistently peddle misinformation or negativity.
Yeah, sometimes you got to do it.
You have the power to curate your own information environment.
Right.
You're in control.
I like that. I'm starting to feel more empowered already.
Good.
But what about using these network dynamics for good?
Oh, yeah.
Can we leverage these connections to create
Absolutely.
positive change?
Understanding how networks work can make you a more effective advocate.
Okay.
For causes you believe in, identify those hubs in your own networks
Right.
who might be receptive to your message.
Okay.
Craft compelling narratives that are both sticky and shareable.
So it's like those same principles that marketers use, but for a good cause.
Exactly.
That's every city.
And remember the power of weak ties.
Right.
Don't be afraid to reach out to those acquaintances who might be bridges to new audiences or communities.
So it all comes down to being more strategic.
It does.
More mindful of how we're connecting and communicating.
Precisely. And that brings us to the future of social networks,
Okay.
which Professor Westland touches on towards the end of his lecture.
What does he say?
He talks about some really mind-blowing possibilities,
Okay.
like the metaverse and decentralized social media platforms.
The metaverse.
Yeah.
I keep hearing that word, but I'm still not sure I understand what it is.
Well, it's a bit of a fuzzy concept right now. But
Yeah.
the basic idea is to create these immersive, persistent, virtual worlds
Okay.
where we can interact with each other in new ways.
So like virtual reality.
Yeah, imagine a virtual reality space
Okay.
where you can attend concerts, shop for clothes,
Hmm.
or even have business meetings all from the comfort of your own home.
So it's like taking those online connections
Yes,
and making them feel more real.
more tangible, exactly.
But that could lead to some problems too, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Like, how do you govern those spaces?
Right.
What about privacy?
All huge questions.
It sounds exciting and a little bit scary.
It is, and that's why it's so important to be having these conversations now.
Yeah.
We need to think critically about the potential implications of these emerging technologies
Right.
and ensure that we're using them in ways that benefit society as a whole.
This has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have a whole new perspective on how connected we all are
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
and how these connections can shape our lives.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Right.
The more we understand about social networks,
Right.
the more empowered we become to navigate them effectively and create positive change.
That's so true. And on that note,
Yes.
I think we should leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder.
Right.
Think about those networks you are a part of,
Okay.
whether it's your family, your friends, your online communities,
Right.
or even those casual acquaintances you bump into at the coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
How might you leverage those connections
Yeah.
to make a difference, to spread ideas you believe in,
Good question.
or to simply create a more positive and connected world?
It's up to all of us.
The power, as we've learned today, is in your hands.
Mm-hmm.